Thank you all for joining us. We're so excited to celebrate 150 years of Smith College. My name is Tatum Lyles-Flick, and this is my co-chair.
I'm Marissa Hochstetter, and together we're co-chairing the college's 150th celebrations, and we're so glad to welcome you all to the Alumnae House today. We're going to turn it over to our dear President Sarah Willie-LeBreton, who will kick us off.
Thank you, Tatum and Marissa. Welcome. Thank you for sharing this special sesquicentennial moment with us. I am Smith College President Sarah Willie-LeBreton, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this event as we celebrate a long-lasting and significant partnership between Smith and the city of Northampton. For over 150 years, Smith and Northampton have grown together, shaping each other's history, culture, and community. This event allows us to reflect on that shared past and imagine what's possible for our collective future. Northampton's charm, dedication to arts and music, and strong sense of community make Smith a special place. And in turn, our students, faculty, and staff contribute to the city's culture, character, and economy. These connections bring us together today. I want to thank Mayor Gina-Louise Sciarra, a Smith alum, and all of us in the city and community partners for their commitment to partnership and for working to make Northampton one of the best places to live and work in New England. My spouse, Jonathan, and I are so fortunate to now call Northampton home. March 8th today marks the day in 1870 when Sophia Smith signed her will establishing Smith College in Northampton. It also just so happens to be International Women's Day. I'm going to confess that I went to the nail salon earlier today. And somebody in the salon said, "Hey, it's International Women's Day," and the whole salon erupted in applause, so it's really nice. Sophia Smith's spirit of generosity lives on within the Smith community. Generosity takes many forms, from her original bequest to the exchange of knowledge that happens in classrooms every day, from our shared commitment to making Smith better to the countless ways alums lead change in the world. In her writings, Sophia famously said, "It is my wish that the institution be so conducted that during all coming time it shall do the most good for the greatest number. I would have it a perennial blessing to the country and the world," unquote. And what a blessing Smith College is to the world. And I say that with all humility, having just arrived. It is doing wonderful things. Founded in 1871, Smith College opened in 1875 with 14 students. Today, Smith is among the largest women's colleges in the United States, with students from 46 states and 78 countries. As we reflect on 150 years and look forward to the next 150, I want to take a moment to share some facts that reflect what Smith has become. The college employs nearly 1,500 people across many fields and industries. We have a world-class faculty of nearly 300 professors in 50 academic departments and programs, offering over 1,200 courses in more than 80 areas of study. We have an 8-to-1 student-to-faculty ratio. We have over 2,500 undergraduate students living in 41 self-governing house communities. 35% of juniors study abroad. We have one of the highest Fulbright success rates in the country, more than double the national average, with 10 awards this year alone. In the 2024-25 academic year, we awarded more than $100 million in Smith grants as scholarship aid. Nearly 18% of our students receive Pell Grants. Athletics offers 11 varsity sports and extensive intramural club sport programs. Just this week, the Smith College basketball team, coming off a 5th straight NUMAC title, is hosting the first 2 rounds of the NCAA tournament for a 4th straight year. The team won its game last night, and I feel confident we will win again this afternoon. The Smith College Libraries holds more than 3 million items, including books, periodicals, microforms, maps, and more. We have an active network of over 54,000 alums worldwide. Alums who make change, lead in their communities, and generously give back to support Smith in so many ways. And now in 2025, we have the opportunity to envision a future Smith that leans even more deeply into its mission, that is more intellectually and creatively engaging, that prepares graduates who are unafraid of difference or challenge, are curious throughout their lives, and who insist on our mutual humanity. What Smith becomes in its next century and a half will be shaped by our work together, both here on campus and in our relationship with Northampton and the surrounding community. That is why it is important that we take moments throughout the sesquicentennial year to pause, to reflect, and to come together in community. I am thrilled to be able to do that today with Northampton Mayor Gina-Louise Sciarra, Smith class of 1996. Mayor.
Good afternoon. Thank you, President Willie-LeBreton. It is an honor to be here on International Women's Day to celebrate Smith College's 150th anniversary and its deep connection to its city, Northampton, and to proclaim today Smith College Founders Day in the city of Northampton. As both the mayor of Northampton and, as you've heard, a proud Smith alumna, this occasion is especially meaningful. I've had the privilege of experiencing Smith from multiple perspectives, notably first as a student on this stunning campus in the city, cradled in this beautiful valley, and now as mayor with the shared goal of working alongside the college to strengthen and support our community. I have publicly remarked many times about how visiting Smith in high school charted the course for me to take that exit off of 91 and enter Northampton that first time. And that, obviously, that would impact my life in ways that I never could have possibly have imagined when I was 17. And also that Northampton, in her charm, as President Willie-LeBreton said, and warmth, was one of the reasons I decided that Smith offered the feel and the experience that was right for me for college. We will celebrate Northampton's 375th anniversary of the granting of its charter as a town in 2029. But the city was incorporated in 1884, a little less than a decade after Smith welcomed its first students. So our history and our growth as a city is completely intertwined with the college. When Sophia Smith revised her will to locate the college in Northampton, she called it a place of superior advantages. That decision has shaped the city we know today. Since the first students arrived 150 years ago, Northampton and Smith have been partners in progress, growing, evolving, and strengthening each other. Smith has brought generations of students, staff, scholars, and leaders to Northampton, enriching our community with ideas and arts and innovation and civic engagement. In return, Northampton has provided the college with a vibrant, welcoming city, a place where students can learn and grow, and where faculty and staff can build their lives, and where Smith's mission can extend beyond its campus walls. The relationship between the city and the college has been dynamic and evolving, shaped by those who have led both institutions. It has been strengthened through partnerships and through collaborations. Smith's commitment to Northampton extends beyond education and culture. It also plays a vital role in the city's economy and civic life. Smith has also made direct investments in Northampton, including support for affordable housing, local businesses, and our public schools. The college is one of our largest employers, and its presence contributes to an estimated $465 million annual economic impact in Western Massachusetts. As we look ahead, I'm excited to continue strengthening this partnership, exploring new ways to collaborate, and to support our services and our missions, ensuring that the next 150 years of Smith and the city of Northampton are even stronger together. So today, on Smith College Founders Day, we honor 150 years of history, of partnership, and of impact, and of women with vision and grit getting things done. And our founding model, Sophia Smith, we honor, who I look forward to learning more about today from my friend, my sister alum, and partner in exuberant love for Northampton and Smith, Laurie Sanders. So congratulations to Smith College, and I am truly honored to share this moment with you, and it is now my privilege to proclaim today as Smith College Founders Day in the city of Northampton. Whereas Smith College was founded in 1871 and has been an integral part of Northampton's community since welcoming its first students in 1875. And whereas the city of Northampton was officially incorporated in 1884 actually, 8 years after Smith College welcomed its first students, since which time the college and the city have flourished together, shaping and strengthening each other through education, arts, and culture. And whereas the partnership between Smith College and the city of Northampton has enriched the cultural, economic, and social fabric of our community, fostering a spirit of collaboration, civic engagement, and shared progress. And whereas Smith College has contributed to the local economy, supporting community initiatives and providing opportunities for learning, the arts, historic preservation, and public discourse that benefits residents. And whereas in this practiced it, not as much as you, sesquicentennial year, we recognize and celebrate the enduring relationship between Smith College and Northampton, honoring the past while looking forward towards a future of continued partnership. And so now, therefore, I, Gina-Louise Sciarra, Mayor of the City of Northampton, do hereby proclaim March 8th as Smith College Founders Day, honoring the day Sophia Smith signed her will establishing Smith College and bringing us together in an enduring partnership to better the lives of our community and beyond. I encourage residents to join in celebrating the history, the contributions, and the lasting impact of Smith College in our community, in witness whereof I have set my hand and imprinted the seal of the City of Northampton on the 8th day of March in the year 2025. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mayor. We are so proud to claim you as a Smithy. Thank you and all of your city partners for this incredible honor for the college and for your friendship. Now I'd like to turn to our other special guest today. We are joined by another Smith alum, Laurie Sanders, class of 1988. Laurie is co-executive director of Historic Northampton, an organization dedicated to collecting and preserving Northampton's past and to engage the community in exploration of our natural, material, and social history. Laurie's going to share with us important connections between Northampton history and Smith College's founding. After her talk, she will take questions, and then we invite you to stay for tea in the gallery here or take part in other activities happening across campus today. You can find today's full schedule in the gallery. Laurie.
Well, thank you so much, President Willie-LeBreton. Thank you, Mayor Sciarra. And so it's, as both the mayor and president remarked, Northampton is a great place. It's a great place to ask questions about history and the integration between Smith's history and Northampton's history, truly in the last 150 years, have been so integrated. What I would like to do with you today is run through sort of how is it that we have Smith College here in Northampton. It's one of the challenges is to learn a little bit more about Sophia Smith. And there are not a lot of words of hers that remain. There's this document that you see in her hand. That was a Sabbath record that she wrote during the last 9 years of her life. But it's not a diary. It's not an autobiography. It's really a personal relationship between her and God. And so it's her spiritual journey. So there are a few nuggets that you find that tell us more about what she was thinking, but she never, thank you very much, mentioned Smith College. The other document that we have written in her hand, aside from one single letter, is her last will and testament. And that, of course, is a very, very different document. That's a powerful public document that she knows everybody's going to read. So that's a challenge, and one of the pieces of work that I relied on extensively is by Quentin Quesnel's, his book, The Strange Disappearance of Sophia Smith. There are many people in this room who you can speak with afterward who know lots of things about Sophia Smith also, and who were instrumental in Quentin's scholarship. So Quentin's book is just so important and informing, and I urge you all to go out to the local bookstore and try to buy a copy. This copy, appropriately enough, that I have borrowed is from the Hatfield Public Library. The other document within Quentin's book is Appendix 6 by Maureen Horkin, who was an Ada Comstock scholar who graduated in 1995. And you're going to hear a little bit more about Maureen at the end. So now a little bit of life and context for Sophia Smith. So Sophia Smith was born 13 years after the American Revolution concluded and 13 years after slavery was abolished here in Massachusetts. She was born the year of the very first contested presidential election when John Adams narrowly won with a sort of a poisonous campaign on both sides. And she was born in Hatfield. Now the star indicates where her house is, and so I know some people are local and some people are not exactly from the valley, so this is where we are. About 4 or 5 miles away from where she was born. And so there were people in Hatfield who commuted back and forth in her day, so it was not too far. Her parents were 19 and 20 years old when they got married. The father built this house, which is still standing, and I'll show you a photograph of that a little bit later. By the time her father built this house, and by the time of 8 years of marriage, they had 3 boys and their first daughter, Sophia Smith. Over the course of the next 9 years, she has 3 younger sisters, and they all live in Hatfield. Now, where in Hatfield are they living? So by the time she's born, the first census has happened in the United States, 1790. At that point, there's about 800 people living in Hatfield. There's 153 houses, which you can see are all kind of concentrated in this narrow area of Hatfield. For those of you who know Hatfield, you get it. What's really neat is that her family on both sides had been in Hatfield, which was originally part of Hadley, but they'd been in Hatfield for about 150 years. So they had deep roots, and in fact, in terms of just the close relatives, like not going out much further, 10% of the people living up and down those streets were her close relatives. So she was definitely part of a community. Where did she live specifically? Well, about here was her house, and if you look across the street, more or less, that's where the church was. The church is currently, the church that you see here was in a slightly different location, but it was in very close proximity to her home. When she looked out the back and down to the south, this was the view out of the back of her house. And it's still the same. So between the back of her house and where you can see those hills in the distance, whether it's the Holyoke Range or that other hill, which now I can't really think of the name of, is the Connecticut River. If you look at this map, this gives you an indication of kind of what Hatfield was like at that time. The section to the west is all white right? That eventually goes to Williamsburg. And this section is documenting that on the map that there's a lot of forest and in the rocky uplands, but the green pastures and hayfields close to the river are a really important source of where people are having their agricultural operations. So this is where she lives, where you can see, and so her whole family, her father, all of her uncles, her 5 uncles, they're all involved in business. Her father and her uncle are operating a dry goods store. They grow rye and other crops for sale. They are part of the fattening of beef cattle, which is part of the transatlantic trade route where those cattle are going down to the West Indies. People are generating money so that they can buy then silks and tea and other products that are coming over from England. And I don't know if you can see it on this map and on this screen, but there are tiny little ships. And her family is involved in the shipping industry. So she's born in 1796. Just 4 years before is the first private canal, which is built around the South Hadley Canal. So this is a time now in Northampton's history, Hatfield's history, where people can have a boat and they can go all the way down to Long Island Sound by going, they don't have to unload everything and then get around South Hadley Falls, but they can just go through a canal. And honestly, that successful canal changes American history. It generates canal fever. It's in this era when she's born that it is this heady optimism after the American Revolution. People are so optimistic, and farming and agriculture is really the economy of the new nation. By 1793, there's the first Farmer's Almanac, the Massachusetts Agricultural Society forms. These 2 images, which are venerate the plow, this is the mindset, but it's this is the era of soon, Adams only has 1 term, Jefferson comes in next. He is all about scientific agriculture and these inventive improvements. So this is the heady era that she's growing up in. She does go to school from ages 4 to 18, but not the kind of school that we think of. It's really in somebody's home where she's getting classes. She probably learns from this New England primer. Her brothers also, all of the kids go all the way through school. Her younger sisters eventually, Hopkins Academy opens in 1818, and by then there's a bridge, no longer extant, but there's a bridge from Hatfield to Hadley, so very easily can get across. But even though Deerfield Academy has established in 1799, just kind of up the road, none of the sons go there, and none of the sons, even though the family is super frugal but very successful, they have the resources, but none of them go on to college. Not going to college, even though I'm here in this college setting from which I graduated, doesn't affect really the success of this family. This family, although they're farmers, they are not remote and isolated. Not only are they close to Northampton, but they are super engaged in community. You can see this long list of all the things that her uncles are involved in. Her uncle Elijah and Rufus are selectmen. Her uncle Benjamin, a selectman for 19 years, 2 terms as the state rep. Her uncle Oliver, who you'll also hear a little bit more about a little bit later, he's a very early bank director when banks get established here in the United States. He's an investor in the Western lands. He's an elector for John Quincy Adams in the late 20s, delegate to Boston, served on every town committee. He's a state rep. I mean, the guy is very, very busy, right? But also when she's growing up, just think about all the changes that are happening in American history. Under Jefferson, there's this acquisition of lands claimed by France, which we call the Louisiana Purchase. Soon after, he contracts with Lewis and Clark, who make this big route and travel. And the other part of being here in Northampton, which both the president and mayor mentioned, is that where Northampton is. So Northampton, if you're going north to south, it's a pretty good place to stop. And if you're going east to west, if you're going from Boston to Albany, geographically, aside from the Connecticut River, aside from the extreme fertility of the fields along the Connecticut River, it makes Northampton a very important place geographically. And so very early on, there's multiple stagecoaches coming through here. Guess what? No surprise, lots of infrastructure. There's hotels, there's taverns, there's liveries. Northampton early on is a place of significance, and that's part of the reason that Northampton is selected early on to be the site of the court. And this also really dramatically changes the history of Northampton, because when you have the court, you have people coming in from away with ideas, and this becomes a place where then again, it's the same thing. You need places for them to get some food. You need places for folks to stay. And there are many judges, and as both the mayor and president mentioned, and we all know, it's pretty beautiful here. So many judges and lawyers also live here. By the time she's in her 20s, she's done with her formal education, but she's probably at home helping with her younger sisters with their schooling. All of her brothers are back. They're getting involved in farming. They've all been involved in the militia for the War of 1812. But, and all of them, all 7, mostly grown-ups now, 7 kids and the 2 parents, they're all living in the same house together. And in fact, that remains the case until Sophia is in her late 20s. Now, although only one of her brothers ends up marrying and all the other kids remain single, her cousins do get married, some of them. It's not like a thing. And so one of her favorite cousins marries a guy named Samuel Fowler Lyman. And he's a young guy, but he's already been selected as high sheriff. And this is his house. And he's married in 1824, and in 1825, he's such a smart guy that they select him as the high sheriff to coordinate when the Marquis de Lafayette comes through on his grand tour, visiting 24 states. When Lafayette comes through, he is the last living general who served in the Revolutionary War, and thousands of people greet him. And guess where he, not only does the high sheriff coordinate his visit on June 14th, but they have dinner at this house. Now, what's important for Smith is you see on this map where S.F. Lyman lives. Now, where we are is right here. So where his house is right here. Now, the other piece that's notable in the history of Smith is that if you can see, I don't know if you can read the letters here, but it says C.A. Dewey. That's Charles Dewey. He's a judge. Anyone think of Judge Dewey's house, which you might recognize now on the Smith campus, looking a little bit like this? Judge Dewey's, his first wife dies young, and he marries another woman who's a Clinton, and her half-brother is the governor of New York. And DeWitt Clinton comes up with this great idea for a really long canal from the Hudson River to Lake Erie, which people think is a really dumb one. And in fact, the then president calls it a little short of madness. It's probably because of that connection that in 1822, the chief engineer for the Erie Canal came to Northampton and laid out the New Haven-Northampton Canal. So in the 1820s, another important thing that is happening is that there's the beginning of the Industrial Revolution in England, and one of the people who is influences that to an extent later in the tourism component is a guy named Timothy Dwight. He's the great-grandson of Jonathan Edwards. He is the president of Yale College. And in those days, the college system was organized so that when the boys needed to go help with the harvest, that's when that's when school was off. And so Dwight, who grows up here in Northampton but is living in New Haven, thinks, I don't want to just be in New Haven. So he gets on his horse and he rides around New England, and he writes these 2 volumes, which are about a kind of a fanciful letter to a friend in Europe, describing the beauty of this landscape. And basically, in his 2 volumes, he visits all the iconic landscapes in New England and New York. So Niagara Falls, Saratoga Springs, the White Mountains, and thank you very much, Mount Holyoke, which in his book he calls the richest prospect in New England, and not improbably the United States. Okay, the world was young, right? But what happens is just a couple years after, there's changes in printing. People have a little bit more money. And so, especially from Europe, this is the first tourist book that comes out in 1825. Plagiarism is no big deal then. There's no code of conduct. And so the Fashionable Tour, which is the first tourism book that comes out, he plagiarizes heavily from Timothy Dwight. But lots of people come. Already 2,000, 5,000, 2,000 to 5,000 people are coming, most of them staying in Northampton, going across the meadows and up to the top of Mount Holyoke. And Sophia, thank you very much, she's coming to Northampton, right? It's just around the nearby, right? All the young women of that day and era, really, they all rode horseback. But in her 30s, she experiences a series of, as Quentin Quesnel described it, sad trials. It's very much so. So remember, there's one brother who's moved out and living down the road, but everybody else is in the house. In 1828, her 23-year-old sister dies. The next year, her brother at 36 dies. The same year, her mother dies. 2 years later, her younger sister dies. So the household has gone from, one person missing to now a very different way of being in that house. Around that time, and maybe because of the sadness, there's several pastors who are coming through her church, and one of them is a fellow named Edward Ameza Park. He ultimately becomes a trustee here at Smith College. But he is, again, this young, effervescent guy who is so charismatic in the pulpit that everyone just wants to be near him. And after she becomes a member of the church at the age of 38, and she maintains a relationship with Park for the rest of her life. So it's also at a time when her uncle is like, I'm out of here, and he leads this group. It's sort of the era of social reforms and lots of new ideas about religion. This is when, in 1825, the Unitarian Church forms here in Northampton. There's these ideas of transcendentalism. There's this, now as we moved into the 1830s and 40s in America, things are very different. There's this wave of how can we fix the problems? So there's all kinds of social reforms, not only with public education with school kids, boys and girls, but this effort for the education of girls and women. You can look through that list. I'm not going to read it all, but you get the picture, right? People are thinking, how do we make things better? How do we work together to improve these different pieces? One of the people who's going around visits 90 towns is Mary Lyon. And she is trying to raise funds to start Mount Holyoke Seminary. By that point, the Smith family is well known in that they've got some money. So we don't have a record, but it would be almost inconceivable that she didn't stop and knock on their door and solicit a donation. Another person who's thinking about the poor and working conditions is Harriet Martineau. And Harriet Martineau is an English woman. It's the early part of the Industrial Revolution. She's got a little bit of money because she writes these serialized stories about working class conditions, and they are wildly popular. People cannot wait for the next chapter to come out. So she makes loads of money, and so she thinks, okay, I'm going to take a little break. I'm in my early 30s. I'm going to take a tour. And she's considering going on the grand tour of Europe, but someone says to her, you know, there's this new nation of America. Why don't you see how they're doing? And she's really credited with being the first sociologist. She spends 2 years here in America. She becomes great buddies with all the Supreme Court justices. She's pals with President Madison. And, thank you, she comes where? To Northampton. And she spends 4 days here, and she is treated by George Bancroft, who's living on Round Hill. He has now left the Round Hill School for Boys, but he's writing the first history of the United States. And she spends 4 days with him, and what does she do? Of course, she goes to Mount Holyoke. She visits the giant elm in the middle meadow. She goes over to Amherst to see Dr. Hitchcock's turkey tracks. And of course, where do they have dinner? At Elmira and Samuel Fowler Lyman's. By the time, in 1836, now Sophia's father dies. And when he dies, he distributes to the last remaining 4 children $10,000 each, which is, again, a very generous amount of money. So by the time she's not quite 40, she is a wealthy woman. And so she and her brother and sister-in-law, they start doing some traveling. And where did they go? They follow to go to these same places. They go to Saratoga Springs, and they start kind of enjoying some of that luxury. Now, around that same time is when Thomas Cole, 1836, comes to this area and paints this now very famous painting. But one of the things I want you to look at in this painting, which we've talked about, is that this painting begins this whole Hudson River School movement. It infused with kind of the ideology of the day, of the calming hand of man, the wildness, this sort of relationship between God and landscape and people. On our end, where do we care right now in this slide? Look at the pastoral scene, because that's what affects the reason why Lydia Mariah Child comes here. It's the fertility of Northampton's soils that lures she and her husband, David Lee Child, to Northampton. Now, for some of the people in this room, I know you'll know L. Mariah Child's name. For those of you who don't, the thing people remember about her now is that she wrote the poem Over the River and Through the Woods. But when she came here, she was a total rock star. She was like the New York Times bestseller. She'd already written about the history of women and women's rights. Elizabeth Cady Stanton thought of her in the highest regard. She was recognized for her novels by Edgar Allan Poe. William Lloyd Garrison just couldn't say enough good things about her. But when she became an active abolitionist, her sales fell. And her husband wanted to come here because they wanted to create blood-free sugar. And they were going to raise sugar beets here. Where did they live? They lived in the boarding house that we now call Duckett. The mill that they were going to revise and rework was this little oil mill in Florence. And that mill, David, her husband, tried doing the beet project. Like the poor guy, really smart, really good-hearted, but it's a total failure in every business venture. So he fails, the early silk industry fails, but then there's this group called the Northampton Association of Education and Industry, and they take over that former mill. And with the creation of the community, so many people come. And it's also this era of the Lyceum. In Northampton, in the 1830s and 40s, it's a place where if you're going on a tour, or if you're a performer, you come to Northampton. You give a play here. You give a musical performance here. And so Sojourner Truth moves to the community. David Ruggles, who comes here to take a water cure and then forms his own water cure, he is the key player when Frederick Douglass escapes and goes to New York, and people say, you know what, you're here in New York, you got to go see David Ruggles. And so that's, Frederick Douglass first comes to Florence and Northampton because he loves David Ruggles. William Lloyd Garrison comes. I mean, it's a long, long laundry list of esteemed people who come here to Northampton. As in 1845, Oliver Smith, her uncle, dies, and he leaves about $20 million. Okay, that's modern money. He only leaves $500,000. Except he's been this like Scroogey, misery guy his whole life, and he doesn't leave basically anything to any of his nieces and nephews. He's a single guy, but what he does is he leaves all of it to these two charitable projects. And so the community is just all the nieces and nephews, they contest the will, they just are out of their mind. It gets statewide coverage. There's thousands of people who come to see the trial, and Sophia Smith and all her cousins, they lose. And what forms is Smith Charities, which is still ongoing, which serves poor individuals and other people who live in Northampton, Hatfield, and 4 other nearby towns. And then the other thing that he does, which is an important, I think, lesson in the back of Sophia Smith's mind, is he sets aside money for 60 years, at which point Smith Vocational is then built, welcoming the first class in 1908. When the will is being fought, and there are these 2 super famous lawyers who come, they are both staying at a nearby hotel, but where do they have dinner together? By the 50s, the whole area has changed. We've gone from an economy in Northampton, which is focused on the agricultural fields, to now one of manufacturing. Just think, along our Little Mill River, there are 40 mills. And what are they producing? And then you go further up, there's buttons and brass works and all kinds of different operations here. And that changes, too, because another important change at that point is that the railroad arrives here in Northampton. Now, the mills, along with the railroad, and just sort of, this is the era of the potato famine, the Great Migration from Ireland. There's also a lot of migration from Germany, and it's those next wave of immigrants, mostly Irish and German, who then extend the railroad through Hatfield from Hatfield up to Greenfield. In this same time period, it's still like Northampton is just this amazing place. Here is the Beyonce of the 1900s. This is Jenny Lind, who thousands of people come to see. And in fact, when she's staying here in Northampton for her honeymoon on a second visit, she goes to Hatfield, and again, thousands of people come to see her. Where is that? It's right across the street from Sophia Smith's house. But by that point, Sophia Smith's hearing has been getting worse and worse and worse. So she buys the highest tech mechanical device of the era, which is this ear trumpet. This is just terribly mortifying for her, and she's so frustrated and resentful of how it limits her ability to interact. But her hearing never completely goes, but it just changes how she moves through the world. By her 60s, the piece about Sophia Smith that I think is so important for all of us to understand is though her formal education ends at 18, this whole family, and certainly from what we can tell, she in particular, is just intellectually curious. She gets 2 papers a day, sometimes 3. She gets Godey's Women's Ladies book. She gets the Atlantic Monthly. The Atlantic Monthly in 1859 has this really important article called "Should Women Learn the Alphabet?" Something like that. And it's written by a guy who is such a champion for women's rights. And he talks about establishing women's colleges. Did she read that article? We don't know, but maybe she did. She also was a subscriber to Harper's, which they talk about the first establishment of Vassar in 1861. That's an important date in Sapphi's. And Harper's recommends this book list. And if you go to the Hatfield Historical Society, you can see a subset of the books. That woman had the most broad, wide-ranging interests when you look at what she read and was interested in. All of these books were subsequently donated to the Smith Literary Society, which was one of her early contributions. By 1857, this guy arrives in her life. He's this young, vivacious, confident reverend named John Morton Green. And he's only 27 years old, but he's full of vim and vigor. And he becomes a close friend of hers. And we can talk about all the reasons why, but that's a different talk. In 1859, 2 years after Green arrives, her close and only remaining sister dies. And this is a very, very tough time in her life. So now she's got one brother who's married, and she's got Austin, who she lives with, and they're the only 2. And so by this point, Austin's fortunes, they've got the money from their dad, and Austin kind of immediately put it in risky investments, lost everything in the 1837 panic, but now he has recovered it in this next 1857. So he's got lots of money, and so they decide to do a reciprocal will. Because Austin has this vision. He wants to be like his Uncle Oliver, but he knows, like, oh, that's going to take time to write that. So for right now, you take my money, and I'll take yours in case we die. And they involve this guy, George Hubbard, who is not only a co-executor of Sophia Smith's will, but is an early trustee here at Smith. He is a farmer with incredible acumen in terms of writing wills and legal issues, and he's utterly trusted. Confidentiality is like superlative in his world. It's very important. But in 1861, her brother dies. She inherits everything. He dies in March. The Civil War begins the next month. She begins to write, this is the one journal that we have, is this personal Sabbath record, 2 months later in June. And she's getting now a lot of pressure from her advisor. She's 65 years old. And they're saying, if you die, what's going to happen? She gets a lot of pressure, and she thinks, it's hard to know, but ultimately, looking at Quentin's book and other things, it appears that she realizes, whether it's through John M. Green or other advisors, she has quite a bit of money, but not enough for her to fund a women's college. So she writes her first will in 1861, but at that point, she's not, if you look at, you'll have to read the book, but she's not really happy with how she sets up that first will. But she has $100,000 set aside for an institute for the deaf and, in Hatfield, and then $50,000 for Amherst College for a scientific school, and then $25,000 for a high school in her town. George Hubbard is the guy who writes that. In this part of her journal, which is not fully transcribed and which is a project I would like to have happen in this year, what you see is just how she's thinking so hard about this incredible opportunity, but also how does she sort through it? And so there's lots of entries like this one. God has seen fit in the dispensation of his providence to remove, this is the loss of her family, these early friends from me, and I must pass the remainder of my life on my pilgrimage alone. My responsibilities are very great. Over and over again, you see this in her Sabbath record, and it's really 9 years of this, trying to figure out, what would God want me to do with this? And she prays over and over again. It's this really request for God's guidance, that her legacy will be consecrated and holy, that she would play a part of wisdom, and that her contributions would be lasting, and that her part in it would be divinely inspired. It's very deeply personal. The other pieces that come through is that this woman is just really suffering the grief and loss of her family. And she's probably depressed at different points. She's also, like some philanthropists, and maybe all of you, if you pick up your mail in the mailbox, beleaguered with requests and suggestions. John M. Green says, I know what you can do with that money. You can build churches out in the West. She hears from people she hasn't heard from for decades. Everybody wants a piece. And we all know how exhausting that can be. There's a couple things that I really admire about her. And what you can tell from this Sabbath record is that she's asking a lot of people, well, what do you think? What do you think I should do? I have this idea. But what's really extraordinary to me is that she's not, certainly in her Sabbath record or any other way that we know of, even in the letters of these other people she's asking, she's never telling them what she's really thinking. She's just like seeking counsel. It's just going in. She finally makes, so she's got her 1861 but she makes her first sort of giving with a warm hand contribution, and she gives to her great friend, Reverend Parks, $30,000 to where he's working now at the Andover Theological Seminary. The other thing, though, is that you don't want to get too dreary when you're looking at her Sabbath record, because if you look at the other things she's doing a lot of amazing things. She's going on lots of vacations. At the age of 69, she's on horseback and she goes to the top of Mount Washington. She goes to New York. She goes to Washington, D.C. She makes shopping trips. She's still very engaged. And she's also not only traveling with friends and family, but she's having people come to her house. So again, her hearing is bad, but it's not completely limiting her. So in her final years, she builds, in 1867, this extraordinary house, which is right next to the house she grew up in. She has, in this time period, she has surgery on her ears, trying to see if they can get any better. But one of the things, and it doesn't work, but one of the things that she does do in this new house is she builds one room entirely dedicated for music, and she buys a beautiful new piano, replacing the one from her house from the 1830s. So I just want to, understand who she is. In 1867, the same year she builds that house, there's an announcement that John Clark of Northampton is funding something called the Clark Institute for the Deaf. And she realizes, whoa, my will has something in that that's almost identical. So she calls her trusted advisor, George Hubbard, and she says, and her financial guy, and she says, how much money do I have these days? And so she removes the Institute for the Deaf that was supposed to be in Hatfield, and she adds the founding of a women's college in Hatfield. And she talks to George Hubbard, who lives in Hatfield with her, and she loves Hatfield, right? She wants the best for Hatfield, and she thinks bringing this college here will just make such a wonderful difference. But she decides, and we're going to have it on Main Street. And all of her other friends are like, Main Street in Hatfield? And so but that's what's in the will. And John M. Green and Hubbard, and these are all, if you look at these names, Osmond Baker, Judge Charles Forbes, Julius Seeley, who was the brother of L. Clark Seeley, they all say to her, oh, please, not Hatfield. Look at Worcester. And in fact, a lot of them are saying, a women's college, that's really not such a great idea. We think it would be a much better idea to support Mount Holyoke and Amherst College because they're already established. Why? It's a bad idea. It's probably not going to work. So, but she talks to Hubbard again, and he says to her, if you want the best for the institution, you want a town with a larger population. So he recommends, for other reasons too, Northampton. And so what are the superior advantages of Northampton? Well, size matters. There's easy access to the train. There's a lot of trains today. There's easy access to faculty. So you can start with a small group of faculty, but thank you very much. The University of Massachusetts has just established in 1866. You can get some folks from there. Maybe you can borrow some faculty who are teaching at Amherst College. The other benefits are that your college is going to be one where you can walk to churches. You don't have to spend money on a new chapel. You can walk to the town library. You don't have to spend money at the get-go on a new library. And the town is vibrant. So thinking about all these things, in March 8th, 1870, she revises her will. But just so you know, in the November of 1869, Hubbard says to her, well, are you ready? What do you think, Northampton? She says, no, I love Hatfield. I'm going to keep it in Hatfield. But on March 8th of that next year, she says to Hubbard, previously, I want to change my will, and I want it to be in Northampton. Now, March 8th is a day for us all now, but March 8th was also a special day for her. It was the 9th anniversary of her brother Austin's death, and I have to think that that was a factor in this decision. On June 12th, even though she's very healthy, she's planning to go to Saratoga. She has a stroke, and a few days later, she dies. At her funeral, just a few days later, John M. Green gets there. He's no longer the pastor in Hatfield. He's just gotten a new appointment in Lowell, and he says to everyone who's there, congratulations, the will hasn't been read, but I know, and you're going to have a new high school, and you're going to have a new women's college in Hatfield. And the Hatfield people are like, woohoo! And then the will is read a few hours later, and it says, actually, it's in Northampton. And so the Hatfield people are not so happy about that. But here are the pieces that are important for us. So these are the pieces that really change, and are the foundation of Smith College and where the college still is. She writes, I hereby make the following provisions for the establishment and maintenance of an institution for the higher education of young women with a design to furnish for my own sex means and facilities for education equal to those which are afforded now in our colleges to young men. And she goes on for two more pieces. This codicil is slightly changed in the final, but this is a clear understanding of what she was shooting for. The intent is the same. It's my opinion that if women have equal education with men, what are called their wrongs will be redressed. Their wages will be adjusted, the weight of their influence in reforming society will be increased. As teachers, writers, mothers, as members of society, their power will be incalculably enlarged. The President already mentioned this, that really what she wants is that this institution becomes a perennial blessing to the country and the world. Now, she's a savvy donor, right? She's had years of people nipping at her. So she is very specific in her will. She wants it to be called Smith College. She details the spending restrictions. She talks about what are the courses. There aren't the variety of subjects that the president mentioned, but she includes this proviso. And such other studies as coming times may develop or demand for the education of women and progress of the race. She's thinking, like, this woman is really smart. She names the trustees. She's not letting that go. And she also names Northampton, but then she says, but Northampton, I want $25,000. And if you don't come up with it in 2 years, guess what? College is going back to Hatfield. This is an era, though, when that happens. And so it's, although the will is contested by Hatfield, who they are mad that it's not going there, they lose. So by January of 1871, the governor founds the college. Basically, it's like Prop 2.5. The legislature gives the A-OK for Northampton to donate $25,000. And off the trustees go, in particular, Judge Forbes and George Hubbard. It is electrifying. So the first thing they do is they buy Judge Dewey's house. Now, Judge Dewey has been dead for a few years. There's only one of his daughters living there, and she's like, great, I'm going to move to Germany. And they buy his house, but they don't just buy it and leave it there. They move it, right? Then, 2 months later, they buy another judge's house, Samuel Fowler Lyman. But we all know that potentially the relationship between Elmira and Sophia as cousins may have influenced this decision. But with this judge's house, it gets even a little bit more interesting because they don't just move the house somewhere on campus, they move it down to State Street. That family has an important role in Smith's history in the nation. Sam Lyman's younger brother, Edward H.R. Lyman, will eventually donate the Lyman Plant House in honor of his mother and the funds for the Academy of Music. Their sister, meanwhile, becomes the grandmother of a guy whose initials are FDR. Now, Northampton might have had superior advantages, but it's having a really tough time. Just some of them are disappearing. I'll just describe it that way. Just a couple weeks after Sophia Smith dies, about a third of downtown Northampton burns. Previously, in the previous May, another third of downtown had burned. There weren't the kind of building permit protocols in that era, so pretty quickly, the landscape. So now when you go to downtown Northampton today, that's why there's this cohesiveness in the downtown landscape. Basically, everything burns in the period of 3 years and is all rebuilt. The other thing that's happened that's extraordinary and a real benefit to Smith College is that the economic impact of fire is so intense that people are like, okay, you know what, we've got the pipes now, we've got the railroad, everybody, all these other large cities are building water supplies, we're going to build our own water supply. And talk about speed. Within 6 months, they've not only figured out where they're going to do it, but they've got a whole plan. This is within a year, the 14 miles of pipe is laid. This is the first reservoir. And they celebrate where thousands of people show up, and the firefighters are there, and they aim their hoses in downtown Northampton, and they can shoot 150 feet in the air and 180 feet laterally, and it's all written up in the Springfield Republican as like such a party. But it's a huge deal. What does that reservoir look like today? This is, for those of you who are local, this is what we call Musanti Beach. So in the first 2 years, they've acquired 13 acres, and they have founded Smith College. By 1873, the amount of money that was left in her estate is accumulating, so much so that L. Clark Seeley, who first is like, you don't have enough money, he now realizes, okay, this is going to happen. There's enough money to make a college. They hire him as the first president. By 1874, they choose the architect. They lay the design for College Hall and the President's House. But in 1874, for those of you who are local, you know, at that point, the greatest dam disaster in American history takes place. That slows things down, but not in such a way that dam disaster, for those of you who are not local, happens here in Williamsburg, Leeds, Florence, and Northampton. By 1875, the builders have a requirement in their contract that they've got to get this up and these buildings up by 1875 when the first students are coming. And already, Northampton is beginning to think this is profitable because they're hiring all these workers to build these buildings. But that next year, there's the largest bank robbery in Northampton, which is in the United States. This could have been really, 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 that's 3 reallys, bad for Smith College. But what happens is when the robbers go into the main vault and steal the $1.5 million in bonds, they miss the small safe just outside where there's $80,000 in Smith College money. 1876 is a tough year. You can see on one edge where there's this burned building, that corner of that building that's still standing, that's the bank. So in 1876, that part of Northampton has a tough time. The First Churches burns, but you can see what the First Churches looks like today. In 1876, the first group of students come in with only 14 students. By 1876, the student body is really growing. We're up to 16, especially because 2 drop out in 1875. But the key thing is, and the community is a little bit ambivalent about this, like, well, maybe you all should lessen the standards because, you know, like, I know you're keeping standards for Harvard and Yale and Amherst, but, like, take it easy, because we want more students, because we want more employment here in Northampton. But Seeley and all the other trustees, they are committed to Sophia's goals of equal education. Major change happens in 1877. Josiah Holland, who was a friend, no surprise, of who? Samuel Fowler Lyman. He's become the editor of Scribner's, and he writes a glowing article about Smith College. Miss Burnham's School, which now we call the Mary Ellen Chase House, that's a preparatory school that also begins in 1877. And by that time, there are more houses. The college buys land along Green Street, snaps up those other small farms and outhouses and outbuildings. And they have 39 students. By 1878, they have 72 students. And those students, where are they going? Well, they're going up to the top of Mount Holyoke to see what? By 1883, when Northampton becomes a city, or is really close to thinking that it's going to become a city, this is what the college campus looks like. It's truly, Sophia Smith's vision is, by this point, everyone agrees, it's not going away. This college is for real. And I want to loop back to Maureen Horkin, who wrote that essay, Appendix 6. That's just excellent. She won a prize for it. This is what she looks like now, 30 years later after graduating. And I wrote to her, as part of this presentation, I wrote to her because the essay is fantastic. And I asked her some questions, and of course, you know, it's a different era. I looked her up on Google. And since she left Smith, she got her law degree. She became, in Florida, she became an assistant attorney general. And in 2018, she became a judge. what's extraordinary about her story is it's just and completely embodies what Sophia Smith was hoping for. She is the first in her family to graduate from college. She is someone who was a flight attendant working out of Fort Lauderdale, looking in the travel section at her local library, but thought, oh gosh, she wandered down to this other area where there were college catalogs. And she picked up, believe it or not, a Smith College catalog. And she read what Sophia Smith hoped would happen for this college. And she describes how electrified she was. She came to Smith and she said she was so happy that she was wearing dark sunglasses because she was crying. And when she was here as a student, she felt like it was this sacred ground. So here's what she wrote to me. Sophia has been a tangible angel in my life, a spiritual guide, a friend, a constant. Her framed photo sits on every desk I've had since 1995 to remind me what I'm capable of. Sophia and my time at Smith are never a long time ago to me, but both are ever present and form the very foundation of my life. So thank you all for coming today. Thank you, Sophia Smith. Thank you, Northampton. And thank you, Smith College.
Wow, and thank you, Laurie. I think in our introductions we went a little long, so we took some time away for Q&A that's formal, but I want to encourage you to go up to Laurie and ask her questions as we gather together at a reception. So it's now my pleasure to invite all of you to join us for a reception out in the gallery. A fun note, we're serving up 2 of the special tea blends that the college introduced last year, Smithy Breakfast, which has caffeine, and Botanic Blend, which does not. In celebration of our 150th, we're also brewing up something special, a delicious green tea as the 3rd custom blend in our series. Voting for the tea's name took place online and across campus over the last few weeks. And it's my honor to announce the winning name today. The green tea, which will be released later this year and on sale at the Smith College bookstore or online, will be named Gray Court Green. So thank you. Thank you again for joining us in this Community Day to celebrate Smith Founders Day. What an extraordinary history you have shared with us. I've got so many questions, and I'm so excited to think about all of this. Thanks again so much, Laurie Sanders, and thank you all for joining us. Please, welcome to the reception.